I'm surrounded by women in my personal life, so I know the answer to this, but I want to hear you describe it. How does it feel as a woman to have someone like Caitlyn Jenner show up and tell you about what it's like to be a woman?
I mean, you know, Caitlyn Jenner was asked what's the hardest part about being a woman, and his answer was picking an outfit. So, you know, no thank you.
That was a very restrained response.
Just, you know, no. I mean, come on. And I continue to have, I continue to be optimistic about American women across the political aisle joining together and standing up and saying no to this. You know, your listeners have no reason to know this, but I hear from rank and file Democrats, especially women, but including plenty of men, all the time, who are appalled at what the party leadership is doing here, and they cannot get a voice other than to tweet.
But and tweet quite unreliably. I mean, you tweet on this topic and you have no idea if that tweet's seen by anybody or if it's suppressed. You know, and if you keep it up, they may take you off, as they have a number of people.
Yeah.
But you wonder about Pelosi, who I did always assume was sincere on the feminist questions. That's the one I've always given her credit for that. You know, why doesn't she say? I mean, at a certain point, like, why is it meaningful to be the first woman anything if women aren't a real category?
Right. You know, I've met the vice president. I've not met Speaker Speaker Pelosi. I've met the vice president. She wouldn't remember. It was very brief, a couple of very brief encounters. But one time I was at an event in New York City at Lincoln Center. This would have been, I don't know, 2012 or 2013. And she was on stage she was Attorney General of California at the time, and she was on stage with her sister. And they were giving a talk, and it was a Women in the World event. It was a conference and various speakers, and they were talking. And so I'm going to say something that's a little bit embarrassing to talk about with a man, but I'm just going to say it anyway. She wanted to say something about menstruation, and then she said, "Oh, I don't know. Should I say that?" And then she said, "Oh, well, we're all women here. We can go ahead and talk about it," because it was all women in the room at the time. She knows what a woman is.
Yeah.
I know the vice president knows what a woman is.
She is one.
And yet she felt the need to announce her preferred pronouns during a town hall during the primary.
Can I ask you, what is that about? Like, who thought up that? That was clearly a pretty well-organized campaign. It came out of nowhere. Your preferred pronouns. What was
the preferred pronouns stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that was in the space of a year, at least in the world that I lived in. I'd never heard of that before. I paid pretty close attention, and all of a sudden it was like, you know, he, him, she, her, Z's, or whatever.
Right.
Who came up with that and why?
It's a good question. I don't know exactly who came up with it, but it's part of this whole thing around diversity and inclusion and gender inclusive language. If we're going to have gender inclusive language, that's code for we're just going to deny the material reality of biological sex. It's not that they necessarily want you to have your pronouns in your email signature because anyone's confused. It's that we have to have gender inclusive language. It's that we all have to sort of go along with the pretense that sex isn't real. So if I can put he, him pronouns in my email signature, which I guess I can, why not? I am lying about biological sex. Right. That's the point of all of this, is to lie about and persuade ordinary Americans that there's no such thing as biological sex.
If there's no such, I mean, so if you can change your sex just by wishing it so, why can't you change other physical characteristics? Why can't you change your race? I mean, so race is at the center of hiring, contracting, admissions. I mean, there's, you know, a lot hangs on what your race is in certain contexts. So there's a massive incentive for people to change their race. You can imagine it anyway. What, honestly, like once you've decided that it's possible to change your biology, why are we stopping with sex?
We're not necessarily. Rachel Dolezal, I don't know if you remember that name.
Very well.
So she claims, right, to be transracial, still, I think, despite getting a lot of criticism for it. But there are sort of weird side movements, right? So there's actually something that people will refer to as trans species, where people will claim to identify as another species. So we do see this cropping up. We see there are people who claim to identify as a different age.
Really?
Yes. There was a criminal defendant recently who...
Actors have done that for years.
Well, there's that. There was a criminal defendant, a middle-aged man, who claimed to identify as a teenage girl. So I say that. Now, that is still fringe, right? Like, this whole transgender thing has definitely taken over mainstream society. That stuff hasn't, but it's coming.
It does seem like a country really in the grip of fantasy, kind of, doesn't it?
Yep. It sure does.
Are you worried about where things... I mean, do you think you're on the winning team here?
You know, I don't know if my team will win in my lifetime. I don't know. But, you know, I mean, that won't stop me from doing everything I can do to protect, first of all, the rights, privacy, and safety of women and girls.
Yes.
And second of all, you know, are tethered to material reality.
Nature wins in the end, but you think it could be a long curve.
I think it'll be a long curve. And, you know, importantly, in the meantime, how many teenagers are going to have their bodies completely mutilated and themselves permanently sterilized? I do very much worry about that. You know, there are a lot of people who are really afraid to take a stand on this.
Yes.
And to those people, I just say, how many women are going to get raped in prison before you take a stand? How many teenage girls are going to have their breasts cut off before you take a stand? I do think that Americans, especially women, but men too, if we all sort of collectively stood up and said, no, stop, enough, I think we could win this. I can't do it myself. I'll keep doing what I'm doing. But I do think we could win this. It's got to be across the political aisle.
It's amazing how evil corporate interests have turned out to be.
It is.
It's really, it just defies, you know, you've been on the left your whole life. I've been on the other side where we gave kind of big companies the benefit of the doubt. I feel ashamed that I participated in that. It was not deserved. Last question. Is this an international phenomenon? I know you've described what's happening in the UK. Clearly in the Anglosphere this is a thing. But
Yep.
How about Africa or Asia?
It's starting. It's starting. Well, it's starting in countries in Africa. It's definitely taking hold in India, for example. It's also taking hold in, I believe, Japan, China, less so China, sorry, Japan and South Korea. So WDI is international, and it's absolutely taking over in the UK, in Germany, in Norway, in France, in Italy, in Spain, throughout continental Europe, Australia, New Zealand, as you said. Well, you said Anglosphere, but yes,
yeah.
But it's also, it encompasses continental Europe. But I am hearing from a friend of mine who's the head of Women's Declaration International India that it is just throughout Indian society as well.
Amazing.
I haven't heard too much. Oh, South America as well. Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Chile. Captured. And probably others. I just don't happen to know women there.
I never do this, but I feel like you're such an underdog up against everybody. Would you just tell our viewers, if you've made it to this point, an hour into this interview, you're interested in Cara Dansky and probably support her mission, how do people learn more about you, your group? Where do they find you?
Please go to womensdeclarationusa.com and womensdeclaration.com, which gives access to the international one. Follow me on Twitter, @KDansky. I talk about this stuff all the time on Twitter, and I haven't gotten banned yet. And go to my website, caradansky.com.
I love it.
And please check out The Abolition of Sex, How the Transgender Agenda Harms Women and Girls.
Yes. You're brave as hell. I mean that, and I admire you. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Cara Dansky. Tucker Carlson is the name of the show. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here on Fox Nation. Of course, will come to you relentlessly every weeknight, 8 p.m. on the Fox News Channel.